The final battle for galactic freedom took place at the Eternal Throne, a massive construct that served as both capital world and fortress for the Kethvar Empire. Admiral Lisa Carter led the largest fleet in human history toward the alien homeworld, knowing that this battle would determine the fate of every enslaved species in the galaxy. The fleet was no longer purely human. Representatives from dozens of liberated species had joined the fight, bringing their own ships and weapons to the final assault. Drakmari warriors flew alongside human pilots. Veltari engineers worked with human technicians, and beings from across the galaxy united in their determination to end the empire that had enslaved them all. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Liberty Prime, watching the Eternal Throne grow larger on the main screen. The construct was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, a planet-sized structure made of crystalline materials that seemed to pulse with inner light. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, representing thousands of years of slavery and oppression. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildup from the surface," reported Lieutenant Walsh, his voice tight with concern. "Whatever they're charging up down there, it's bigger than anything we've seen before." Jake studied the sensor readings and felt a chill run down his spine. The energy signature was off the scale, representing power levels that could destroy entire star systems. Overlord Zethkrin had decided that if he could not keep his empire, he would destroy the species that had taken it from him. Dr. Phillips had been working around the clock to decode intercepted Kethvar communications. What he discovered made him immediately contact Admiral Carter with urgent priority. "Lisa, they have an ancient weapon system built into the Eternal Throne. It's called a star killer, and it's designed to destabilize the nuclear fusion process in any star within 50 light years." The implications were staggering. If Zethkrin activated the star killer weapon, he could destroy Earth's sun along with the home stars of every species that had joined the rebellion. Billions of worlds would become lifeless rocks drifting in the cold of space. The weapon represented the ultimate expression of Kethvar philosophy. If they could not rule, no one would be allowed to live free. Colonel Rebecca Foster commanded the ground assault forces preparing to storm the Eternal Throne. Her troops were a mix of human marines and warriors from liberated species, all trained in the urban warfare tactics that had proven so effective against Kethvar defenders. The mission was to fight through the massive construct and shut down the Star Killer before it could be activated. "Listen up, everyone," Rebecca told her assault teams as they prepared for the final battle. "We've come further than anyone thought possible, but this is where it all ends. Either we shut down that weapon and free the galaxy, or we all die together. I know which outcome I prefer." The space battle began when the Allied fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Eternal Throne system. Hundreds of Kethvar warships moved to intercept them, creating the largest space battle in galactic history. Human chaos tactics met alien precision in a conflict that would determine the future of intelligent life throughout the galaxy. Captain Rodriguez led a squadron of converted civilian ships in a desperate attack on the Kethvar defensive lines. Her makeshift fleet used every dirty trick humanity had learned during the war, creating confusion and disorder that disrupted alien coordination. Where the Kethvar expected organized resistance, they found chaotic attacks that came from every direction at once. Danny Thompson had developed his most ambitious weapon for this final battle. The Cascade Disruptor was designed to overload the crystalline technology that powered Kethvar civilization. When the massive device was deployed near the Eternal Throne, entire sections of the construct began to lose power as their crystal matrices became unstable. "The Cascade is working," Danny reported from his position aboard the Retribution. "Their power systems are failing faster than they can repair them. But we need to get ground forces inside before they can activate emergency backups." The assault on the Eternal Throne began with the largest orbital drop in military history. Thousands of assault ships carrying troops from dozens of species descended toward the construct's surface while the space battle raged overhead. Kate Johnson led the advance teams that would secure landing zones for the main invasion force. Fighting inside the Eternal Throne was unlike anything the Allies had encountered before. The construct was a maze of crystalline corridors and chambers that seemed to extend for hundreds of kilometers in all directions. Kethvar defenders used their knowledge of the terrain to mount fierce resistance, but they were fighting enemies who had learned to adapt to any situation. Dr. Stone had joined the ground assault to study Kethvar psychology during their final desperate stand. What she discovered changed everything humanity thought they knew about their enemy. Hidden deep in the construct's archives, she found records showing that the Kethvar themselves had once been enslaved by an even more ancient empire. The rigid hierarchy, the technological dependence, the inability to adapt. Helen explained in a hurried transmission to Admiral Carter. These aren't natural Kethvar characteristics. They're symptoms of their own enslavement that happened so long ago they've forgotten their original nature. This revelation provided the key to defeating the Starkiller weapon. Dr. Phillips, working with Veltari technicians who understood crystalline technology, realized that the ancient weapon system had built-in safeguards designed by the Kethvar's original masters. If they could access the deepest control protocols, they might be able to shut down the weapon without destroying the Eternal Throne. The race to reach the weapon control center became a desperate fight through the heart of the construct. Colonel Foster's assault teams battled Kethvar guards while Dr. Phillips worked to decode the ancient control systems. Every minute that passed brought the Starkiller closer to full activation. Alex Turner led a small team through maintenance tunnels to reach the weapon core while the main assault drew attention from Kethvar defenders. The infiltration mission was humanity's last chance to prevent galactic genocide. As they crawled through the narrow passages, Alex could hear the increasing hum of energy that meant the Starkiller was almost ready to fire. The final confrontation took place in the weapon control chamber, a vast crystalline cathedral where Overlord Zethkrin waited with his remaining guards. The alien leader had activated the Starkiller manually, and only his personal authorization codes could shut it down, but Zethkrin would rather die than surrender his empire. "You have destroyed everything my people built over 2,000 years, Zethkrin said as human troops surrounded him. "If I cannot rule the galaxy, I will ensure that no species will ever be free to oppose us again." Dr. Phillips made one last desperate attempt to decode the shutdown sequence, while Kate Johnson's team fought the remaining Kethvar guards. With seconds to spare before the weapon fired, Ryan discovered the deepest protocol layer, one that dated back to the original enslavement of the Kethvar species itself. "The original masters built in a fail-safe," Ryan shouted over the sound of battle. "A code that would shut down any weapon system if their slaves tried to use it for genocide. I think I can activate it." The Starkiller weapon shut down just as it was beginning to discharge, its ancient safeguards recognizing that genocide was forbidden even to its creators. The crystalline construct began to power down as emergency systems activated throughout the Eternal Throne. The war was over. Overlord Zethkrin collapsed as the neural conditioning that had controlled his species for millennia finally broke down. Without the constant reinforcement of the Empire's control systems, he began to remember fragments of what his people had been before their enslavement. The sight of the once mighty alien leader weeping for his lost culture moved even hardened human soldiers to pity. 5 years later, the galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition. The former slave worlds were rebuilding their original cultures while working together on exploration and scientific advancement. The Free Worlds Alliance had grown to include over 1,000 species, all committed to mutual defense and shared prosperity. Admiral Carter stood in the memorial garden that had been built on the site of the former slave processing center on Kethvar Secundus. Representatives from dozens of species had contributed plants and artwork to create a living reminder of their shared struggle for freedom. Children from multiple worlds played together, while their parents worked on projects that would have been impossible under the old empire. The Kethvar survivors were slowly recovering their original nature with help from human psychologists and Veltari healers. Many had chosen to join the Free Worlds Alliance, contributing their advanced technology to peaceful purposes for the first time in thousands of years. Zethkrin himself had become a leader in the movement to help other former slave species recover their lost identities. Jake Morrison, now Fleet Admiral of the Alliance Defense Force, often reflected on how humanity's greatest strength had not been their weapons or tactics, but their refusal to abandon their core values even when facing extinction. They had proven that freedom was not just humanity's birthright, but the natural state of all intelligent life. The war had moved beyond the solar system, and humanity was winning battles that should have been impossible. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the blue giant star Kethvar Secundus grow larger on the main screen. This system contained the largest slave processing center in the alien empire, and it was humanity's next target. The Retribution was a purpose-built warship, the first vessel humanity had designed specifically for fighting the Kethvar. It combined human engineering with captured alien technology, creating something that neither species could have built alone. Lisa had handpicked the crew from volunteers across the entire solar system, and every person aboard the ship was determined to strike a blow against the Empire that had tried to enslave them. "Admiral, we're receiving signals from the planet's surface," reported Communications Officer Janet Mills. "It's not Kethvar military frequencies. It sounds like distress calls from the slave populations." Lisa studied the translation data flowing across her screens. The signals were coming from dozens of different species, all asking for help in languages that human computers were still learning to understand. Word of humanity's victories had spread throughout the galaxy, and enslaved populations everywhere were hoping for liberation. The fleet that accompanied the Retribution was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Paul Martinez had converted over 50 civilian vessels into warships, each one designed for a specific role in the assault. Cargo haulers had been turned into troop transports, luxury liners had become mobile command centers, and even small courier ships had been armed with weapons that could threaten Kethvar cruisers. Colonel Steve Mitchell commanded the ground forces aboard the fleet. His troops were a mix of professional soldiers and civilian volunteers who had learned to fight during the invasion of Earth. They were equipped with a combination of human weapons and captured Kethvar technology, creating an arsenal that could adapt to any situation. "Remember, our job is liberation, not conquest," Steve told his officers as they prepared for the assault. "We're not here to replace the Kethvar as masters. We're here to set people free and teach them to stay free." The battle for Kethvar Secundus began when the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. The Kethvar defenders had been expecting the attack, but they were not prepared for the tactics humanity brought to the fight. Instead of engaging in a traditional space battle, the human ships scattered in all directions, using unpredictable flight patterns that confused alien targeting systems. Danny Thompson had developed new weapons specifically for this battle. His chaos bombs were devices that generated random electromagnetic pulses designed to overload Kethvar computer systems. When conventional human weapons failed to penetrate the planetary shields protecting Kethvar Secundus, Danny's chaos bombs created gaps in the defenses that allowed assault ships to reach the surface. "The shields are designed to stop organized attacks," Danny explained over the communication network as his devices began to take effect. "But they can't adapt fast enough to handle completely random energy patterns. It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape." Kate Johnson led the first wave of troops to reach the planet's surface. Her teams were trained in the urban warfare tactics that had proven so effective against Kethvar forces in the solar system. They moved through the slave processing centers like ghosts, appearing suddenly to strike at key targets before disappearing, into the maze of corridors and chambers that made up the massive facilities. The Kethvar defenders were completely unprepared for human ground combat tactics. Their military doctrine was based on using overwhelming technological superiority to crush organized resistance. They had no experience fighting enemies who used stealth, deception, and guerrilla warfare as primary strategies. "They keep trying to fight us like we're another conventional army," Kate reported from inside the main processing center. "Every time they set up a defensive line, we just go around it. Every time they bring up heavy weapons, we disappear before they can use them." Dr. Phillips had accompanied the ground forces to serve as translator and intelligence analyst. As human troops fought their way through the processing centers, Ryan was documenting the horrors that the Kethvar Empire had created. He found detailed records of the enslavement process and evidence of experiments that had been conducted on captured populations. "This is worse than we imagined," Ryan transmitted to Admiral Carter. "They've been systematically destroying the cultures and identities of entire species. The Drakmari used to have advanced mathematics and poetry. The Veltari created art that would make humans weep with its beauty. All of that has been erased and replaced with simple work instructions. The liberation of Kethvar Secundus took 3 days of continuous fighting. Human forces had to battle through layer after layer of defenses, while simultaneously working to free millions of enslaved beings from dozens of different species. The logistics of the operation were staggering, but humanity had learned to improvise solutions to impossible problems. Captain Rodriguez led a strike team that captured the main control center for the entire facility. The HFY command staff surrendered rather than fight to the death, which surprised the humans until they realized that the aliens had never encountered a situation where surrender was an option. Previous species had either submitted immediately or been wiped out completely. Dr. Stone made the most important discovery of the entire campaign while examining the freed slave populations. The HFY neural conditioning technology had a fatal weakness that no one had understood before. The control systems required the subjects to remain emotionally passive and intellectually compliant. The presence of humans, with their chaotic emotional patterns and aggressive independence, was actively disrupting the conditioning of other species. "It's like we're broadcasting an immunity signal," Helen explained in her reports. "Human emotional responses are so intense and unpredictable that they're overriding the HFY control frequencies. Just being around us is helping other species remember who they used to be." As the battle for HFY Secundus continued, something unprecedented began to happen throughout the alien empire. On world after world, enslaved populations were beginning to remember their original identities and rebel against their masters. The mere knowledge that successful resistance was possible had sparked hope in billions of beings who had lived in slavery for generations. The Drakmari were the first to organize effective resistance. Their warrior culture had been suppressed but not completely destroyed by centuries of enslavement. When news of human victories reached their homeworld, dormant fighting instincts began to reassert themselves. Within days, Drakmari slaves were organizing uprisings in mining colonies across their former territory. The Veltari rebellion took a different form. Their scientific minds had been forced to serve HFY technology for so long that they understood alien systems better than their creators did. Veltari slaves began sabotaging critical infrastructure, causing system-wide failures that crippled HFY operations on hundreds of worlds. Overlord Zethkrin watched from his command ship as reports of rebellions flooded in from across the Empire. His perfect slave system, built over 2,000 years of successful conquests, was falling apart because of one species that refused to follow the rules. The humans had not just resisted enslavement, they had somehow taught resistance to every other species in the galaxy. "How is this possible?" Zethkrin demanded of his advisors. "We have successfully conquered 47 different species. Our methods are proven and our technology is superior. How can one primitive species cause such chaos throughout the Empire?" His chief scientist, Sub-Overlord Kethman, had been studying human behavior since the invasion began. "The humans are different from any species we have encountered before. Their neural patterns are chaotic rather than orderly. Their social structure is based on individual choice rather than hierarchy, and their emotional responses are too intense for our control systems to suppress." The liberation of HFY Secundus was completed when the last HFY defenders abandoned their positions and retreated to their ships. Human forces had successfully freed over 10 million enslaved beings representing 23 different species. More importantly, they had captured detailed intelligence about HFY operations throughout the galaxy. Admiral Carter stood in the main control room of the former slave processing center, watching as liberated beings worked alongside human technicians to shut down the systems that had held them in bondage for so long. Representatives of species that had not been free for centuries were learning to make choices again, and the sight filled her with determination to continue the fight. All human forces. "This is Admiral Carter," she broadcast to the fleet. "Phase 1 of Operation Breakchain is complete. We've proven that the HFY can be defeated and that their slaves can be freed. Now we move to Phase 2. We're going to take this fight directly to their homeworld and end this empire once and for all." The victory at HFY Secundus had proven that humanity could fight the aliens on equal terms, but it had also revealed the true scope of the challenge they faced. 3 months had passed since the HFY invasion began, and humanity had transformed completely. What started as a peaceful spacefaring civilization had become something the galaxy had never seen before. Every human settlement from Earth to the outer asteroid mines had become a fortress, and every civilian had become a soldier. Former NASA engineer Paul Martinez stood in what used to be the passenger lounge of the luxury liner Star Princess. The beautiful ship that once carried wealthy tourists between Earth and Mars was now the flagship of humanity's growing resistance fleet. Paul had spent weeks converting the vessel into a warship, replacing elegant dining rooms with weapon systems and turning the observation decks into command centers. She's not pretty anymore, but she's deadly, Paul said to Captain Rodriguez as they watched workers install the final weapon systems. We've got missile launchers where the swimming pools used to be, and the main dining hall is now a fighter bay. The converted ship had been renamed Freedom's Edge, and it was just one of dozens of civilian vessels that had been transformed into instruments of war. Cargo haulers became troop transports, mining ships became mobile weapon platforms, and even small personal craft were converted into fighters and bombers. Marine Colonel Rebecca Foster had established training camps on every human world and station. Rebecca was a tough woman who had served in conflicts across Earth before joining the Space Marines. Now she was teaching survival skills to people who had never held a weapon before the invasion started. Listen up, Rebecca told a group of new recruits at the training camp on Ceres Station. The Kethvar fight like they've always fought, with overwhelming technology and rigid tactics. We're going to teach you to fight like humans, which means we're going to teach you to be unpredictable, creative, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. The training program was unlike anything in human military history. Rebecca was teaching accountants how to make bombs, teachers how to set ambushes, and artists how to sabotage alien equipment. The Kethvar military doctrine was based on fighting other species that followed conventional military patterns. They had no idea how to deal with an enemy that refused to follow any rules. Intelligence Officer Alex Turner had volunteered for the most dangerous mission of the war. Alex had infiltrated a Kethvar prison ship by hiding aboard a captured human transport. The prison ship contained thousands of humans who had been taken in the early days of the invasion, plus representatives of other species that the Kethvar had enslaved over the centuries. What Alex found aboard that prison ship changed everything humanity thought they knew about their enemy. The other enslaved species were not just prisoners. They had been transformed into something barely recognizable as intelligent life. Their minds had been altered by Kethvar technology until they could only follow simple commands and perform basic labor. The Drakmari used to be warriors, Alex reported in a secret transmission back to Earth. I found records showing they had advanced technology and fought the Kethvar for decades before being conquered. Now they're just mindless drones who follow orders without question. The crystalline Veltari had once been master engineers and scientists. Alex found examples of their original artwork and technical specifications that showed incredible creativity and intelligence. Now they served as living computers aboard Kethvar ships, their minds completely devoted to processing data for their masters. Dr. Phillips had been working around the clock to decode captured Kethvar databases. The translation work was incredibly difficult, because the aliens used different communication methods for different types of information. Their strategic planning was recorded in complex harmonic patterns that changed meaning based on frequency and timing. I've broken through their military databases, Ryan announced during a meeting with Jake Morrison and Admiral Carter. The scope of their empire is staggering. They control thousands of worlds, with enslaved populations numbering in the trillions. We're not just fighting for our own freedom. We're fighting against a system that has destroyed entire civilizations. The Kethvar had been building their empire for over 2,000 years. They would arrive at a world with advanced technology and seemingly peaceful intentions. The neural subjugation technology would then be used to enslave the entire population, turning them into a workforce for the empire. No species had ever successfully resisted the process until now. Captain Rodriguez had been leading strike missions against Kethvar facilities throughout the solar system. During one raid on a processing center hidden in the asteroid belt, her team made a discovery that changed the entire nature of the war. They found human children who had been captured in the early days of the invasion. The children showed signs of genetic modification experiments. The Kethvar had been trying to alter human DNA to make them more suitable for slave labor. They wanted to remove the unpredictable emotional responses that made humans so difficult to control. The sight of children who had been subjected to these experiments filled every human who heard about it with cold fury. They're not just trying to enslave us, Amy told Jake during the mission debrief. They're trying to change what it means to be human. They want to turn our children into the same kind of mindless drones they've made from every other species. President Nathan Clark had been coordinating Earth's resistance from a hidden bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. Nathan was a former military officer who had been elected president just 2 years before the invasion. He had never expected to be a wartime leader, but he had risen to the challenge with determination that impressed even his political opponents. "We're not just defending our worlds anymore," Nathan announced in a broadcast to all human settlements. "We're going to take the fight to them. Operation Breakchain is approved. We're going to start liberating the other species they've enslaved." Operation Breakchain was humanity's most ambitious plan yet. Instead of just defending Earth and Mars, human forces would strike directly at Kethvar slave processing centers. The goal was not just to free human prisoners, but to begin disrupting the entire slave economy that supported the alien empire. Danny Thompson had become humanity's leading expert on Kethvar technology. Working from a converted factory in Detroit, Danny led a team of engineers and scientists who were reverse engineering every piece of alien equipment they could capture. Their work was providing human forces with weapons and defenses that could match Kethvar technology. "The key is understanding how they think," Danny explained to his team as they worked on a captured Kethvar shield generator. "Their technology is incredibly advanced, but it's designed by minds that think in very rigid patterns. Once you understand the pattern, you can find ways to disrupt it." Kate Johnson had expanded her urban warfare training program to include space combat tactics. Kate's teams were teaching human forces how to fight battles inside space stations and aboard enemy ships. The Kethvar had never faced enemies who were willing to board their vessels and fight hand-to-hand combat in zero gravity. "Space combat is just urban warfare in 3 dimensions," Kate told her instructors. "The same principles apply. Use the environment to your advantage. Always have multiple escape routes, and never give the enemy a chance to use their superior firepower effectively." Dr. Stone's research into Kethvar psychology had revealed important weaknesses in their command structure. The aliens had a rigid hierarchy where orders flowed from the top down without any input from lower ranks. This made them efficient when everything went according to plan, but completely unable to adapt when facing unexpected situations. "They're like a computer program," Helen explained in her reports. "Very effective at executing predetermined responses to known situations, but completely lost when faced with something outside their programming. Human unpredictability is their worst nightmare." The first major test of Operation Breakchain came when the Freedom's Edge led a strike force to attack a Kethvar processing station near Jupiter. The station was heavily defended and contained thousands of human prisoners, plus enslaved members of other species. The battle would determine whether humanity was ready to take the war beyond the solar system. Jake Morrison commanded the strike force from Liberty Prime, which had been upgraded with captured Kethvar weapons and shields. As they approached the target, Jake could see the massive alien station rotating slowly in space, its crystal surfaces glowing with energy that represented the suffering of countless enslaved beings. "All units, this is Morrison," Jake broadcast to the assault fleet. "Remember why we're here. Those are our people in that station, and we're bringing them home. After that, we're going to make sure this never happens to anyone else." The battle for the Jupiter processing station lasted 8 hours and ended with complete human victory. The station was captured intact, along with detailed records of Kethvar operations throughout the galaxy. More importantly, over 15,000 human prisoners were freed, along with representatives of 6 other enslaved species. But the most significant result of the battle was the effect it had on the freed aliens. For the first time in centuries, members of other species remembered what it felt like to be free. The presence of humans with their chaotic emotional patterns and fierce independence. The year was 2157, and humanity had finally made their mark on the stars. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the orbital station Liberty Prime, watching the red surface of Mars through the large windows. 3 million humans now called the Red Planet home, living in domed cities and underground colonies. Earth was still the mother world, but Mars had become humanity's first real step into the galaxy. Jake had been commanding the joint Earth-Mars Defense Fleet for 2 years now. It was mostly a peaceful job, dealing with asteroid mining disputes and helping lost cargo ships find their way home. The fleet consisted of 12 warships, though they were more like armed cargo haulers than real military vessels. Humanity had never needed to fight anyone in space before. That morning started like any other. Jake was drinking his coffee and reading reports when Lieutenant Danny Walsh burst into the command center. His face was white as paper and his hands were shaking as he held a data pad. "Sir, You need to see this right now, Danny said, his voice cracking with excitement and fear. Long-range scanners picked up something big coming our way. Jake took the datapad and looked at the readings. 12 massive objects were approaching the solar system from deep space. They were huge, each one at least 3 times larger than Liberty Prime. The ships moved in perfect formation and their design was unlike anything humans had ever built. They were made of what looked like crystal and metal fused together, glowing with soft blue light. How long until they reach us? Jake asked, trying to keep his voice calm. 6 hours, sir. They're moving fast but slowing down as they get closer. It looks like they want to talk, Jake. Immediately contacted Admiral Lisa Carter on Earth. Lisa was the head of Earth's xenobiology department, and the person everyone agreed should handle first contact with aliens if it ever happened. She had spent 20 years studying the possibility of alien life and preparing for this exact moment. Lisa, we have visitors, Jake said over the secure communication link. Big ones. Admiral Carter was a small woman with gray hair and sharp green eyes. She had been waiting for this call her entire career. Within an hour, she was aboard the UES Constitution, humanity's most advanced ship, heading toward the approaching alien fleet. The Constitution was equipped with every translator, scanner, and communication device humans had ever built. Dr. Ryan Phillips joined the first contact team as the chief linguist. Ryan was young but brilliant, able to speak 15 human languages and decode communication patterns faster than any computer. He brought with him every piece of equipment needed to understand alien speech. As the alien ships came closer, humanity got its first good look at them. The vessels were beautiful in a way that human ships could never be. They looked like they had been grown rather than built, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to shift color in the light. Each ship was covered in patterns that might have been windows or might have been decorations. The aliens made first contact exactly as humans had always hoped they would. A clear signal came from the lead ship, broadcasting on multiple frequencies in what seemed like a greeting. The message was complex but peaceful, filled with mathematical concepts that showed intelligence and good intentions. Admiral Carter responded with humanity's prepared first contact message, a combination of math, science, and peaceful greetings that had been approved by every nation on Earth. The alien response came quickly, and it was even more encouraging. They wanted to meet face to face. The meeting took place aboard the Constitution in a specially prepared chamber. When the alien delegation arrived in a small shuttle, humanity saw their new visitors for the first time. The aliens called themselves the Kethvar, and they were unlike anything humans had imagined. They stood 7 feet tall with pale, almost transparent skin that showed the flow of strange fluids underneath. They had 4 arms instead of 2, and their faces were long and narrow with large eyes that seemed to see everything. Their leader introduced himself as Overlord Zethkrin. He spoke through a device that translated his harmonic language into perfect English. His voice was beautiful, like music mixed with speech, and every word seemed chosen with great care. We greet humanity with joy and respect, Zethkrin said, bowing in a gesture that seemed genuinely friendly. We have traveled far to meet you, having heard your signals across the void. Your species shows great promise. Admiral Carter felt a surge of excitement and pride. First contact was going better than anyone had dared hope. The Kethavar spoke of trade agreements, cultural exchange, and the possibility of humanity joining a larger galactic community. They showed images of beautiful worlds, advanced cities, and technologies that could solve every problem humanity faced. We offer partnership, Zethkrin continued, producing a crystalline device that projected text in the air. A formal agreement between our peoples that will bring great benefits to both. Dr. Phillips studied the alien text, while Admiral Carter and Zethkrin continued their discussion. The alien writing was incredibly complex, filled with symbols that seemed to move and change as he watched them. The translation equipment was having trouble with some sections, but the general meaning seemed clear. It was indeed a trade agreement, offering humanity advanced technology in exchange for resources and labor. But something felt wrong to Ryan. He was trained to notice patterns in language, and there were patterns in the Kethvar text that made him uncomfortable. Some sections seemed to be written in a different style, almost like fine print in a human contract. He quietly began running deeper analysis on the alien communication frequencies. Captain Amy Rodriguez of the UES Guardian was monitoring all communications from her ship. Amy had been a military intelligence officer before joining the space fleet, and she had learned to be suspicious of anything that seemed too good to be true. While Admiral Carter was having her historic meeting, Amy was listening to every signal coming from the alien fleet. What she heard made her blood run cold. Hidden beneath the main communication frequencies, the Kethvar ships were broadcasting to each other in what they thought were secure channels. Amy's equipment was sensitive enough to pick up these hidden messages, and the automatic translation was working on them. The aliens were discussing humans like farmers discussing livestock. They talked about human physical capabilities, work capacity, and breeding potential. They mentioned successful operations on dozens of other worlds where they had acquired entire populations for their empire. The trade agreement was not what it seemed to be. Amy immediately contacted Dr. Phillips on the Constitution. "Ryan, you need to check those documents again. I'm picking up communications that suggest we're being set up." Ryan dove deeper into his analysis of the alien text. Using the information Amy provided about their hidden communications, he began to see the truth. The beautiful flowing text contained hidden meanings, subliminal commands, and legal structures that would effectively make humanity slaves of the Kethvar Empire. But it was too late to stop the meeting politely. Admiral Carter was already expressing humanity's interest in the agreement, and Overlord Zethkrin was preparing to formalize the arrangement. When the humans finally declined the offer and asked for more time to consider, the alien's demeanor changed instantly. The beautiful harmonic voice became cold and mechanical. "That is unfortunate," Zethkrin said. "We had hoped for voluntary cooperation." The alien ships immediately changed formation, spreading out to surround Earth and Mars. Their crystal surfaces began to glow brighter, and new structures emerged from their hulls. Humanity's peaceful first contact had become something much more dangerous. Jake Morrison watched from Liberty Prime as the alien fleet took aggressive positions. 12 ships against humanity's entire defense force. The odds were not good, but Jake had a feeling that the Kethvar had made a serious mistake in their calculations about what humans would do when threatened. The attack began at exactly noon Earth time. Overlord Zethkrin activated what the Kethvar called neural subjugation fields, invisible waves of energy that had successfully conquered 47 different species across the galaxy. The technology was their greatest weapon, designed to override the free will of any intelligent species and make them completely obedient to Kethvar commands. Dr. Nicole Barnes was working in her laboratory on Luna Station when the fields hit. She was studying human brain patterns for a sleep disorder project when every monitor in her lab began showing impossible readings. The neural activity of her test subjects had not decreased as the Kethvar technology intended. Instead, human brain waves became more chaotic and more active than she had ever seen before. "This makes no sense," Nicole said to her assistant, looking at the wild patterns dancing across her screens. "These readings show that human neural activity is actually increasing, not shutting down." On Earth, the results were even more dramatic. Instead of falling to their knees in submission like every other species the Kethvar had conquered, humans began to get angry. Very angry. The neural subjugation fields designed to make them passive had somehow triggered the exact opposite response. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Mitchell was leading a training exercise at Fort Bragg when the alien attack began. Instead of feeling the urge to surrender, Steve felt a burning rage unlike anything he had experienced before. Every soldier on the base reported the same thing. The alien mind control had backfired completely, filling them with determination to fight. "All units, this is not a drill," Steve shouted over the base communication system. "We are under alien attack, and our response is to show these invaders what happens when you threaten humanity." In Detroit, factory worker Danny Thompson was getting ready for his lunch break when the first Kethvar scout ships appeared over the city. The small crystalline vessels swooped down, expecting to find a population of compliant slaves ready to be collected. Instead, they found humans who had organized themselves into resistance groups in less than an hour. Danny had military training from his time in the National Guard, and he quickly took charge of the workers in his factory. When the first alien ship crashed in the parking lot after being hit by a surface-to-air missile, Danny led a team to examine the wreckage. While other species had always been too frightened to approach Kethvar technology, humans immediately began taking it apart to see how it worked. "Look at this," Danny said, pulling a strange device from the crashed ship. "It's some kind of energy projector, but the design is actually pretty simple once you understand the basic principles." Former Navy SEAL Kate Johnson was in New York when the invasion began. She had been working as a security consultant, but her military training kicked in immediately when the crisis started. Kate began organizing civilian resistance groups, teaching them urban warfare tactics that would work against an occupying force. The Kethvar had expected to face panicked refugees fleeing the cities. Instead, they found themselves fighting enemies who seemed to appear from nowhere, strike hard and disappear before they could respond. Kate's teams used everything from hunting rifles to construction equipment as weapons against the alien forces. "Remember, they have better technology, but they don't understand how we think," Kate told her teams over stolen radio equipment. "We use that against them. Fight dirty, fight smart, and never give them a fair fight." On Mars, the situation was even more chaotic for the Kethvar forces. Sergeant Carlos Mendez was part of the Mars Colonial Defense Force, a small military unit that was supposed to handle emergencies like equipment failures and mining accidents. They were not prepared for alien invasion, but they were prepared to improvise. Carlos discovered that the Kethvar ships had powerful shields that could stop any direct attack, but the shields had a weakness. They were designed to deflect energy weapons and projectiles, not explosions from inside their defensive perimeter. Carlos led a team that planted improvised explosive devices on alien landing craft while they were on the ground. "These shields work great against missiles," Carlos explained to his team as they watched a Kethvar ship explode. "But they can't stop a bomb that's already inside their defenses." Pilot Tracy Adams was flying cargo runs between Earth and Mars when the invasion started. Her ship was not a fighter, just a converted passenger transport. But Tracy had grown up flying in dangerous conditions. When Kethvar fighters tried to intercept her, she discovered something important about alien tactics. The Kethvar flew in perfect formations with precise movements that followed clear patterns. Their ships were faster and had better weapons, but they could not adapt to unpredictable flying. Tracy began using random flight patterns, sudden direction changes, and aggressive maneuvers that confused the alien pilots. "They fly like computers," Tracy reported over the emergency communication network. "Precise and effective, but they can't handle chaos. Human pilots have a huge advantage because we're willing to take risks they would never consider." Dr. Helen Stone made the most important discovery of the early invasion period. Helen was a psychologist working on Mars colony, studying how humans adapted to life in space. When the Kethvar tried to scan human minds to understand their resistance, Helen noticed something strange happening to the alien scanning equipment. Human emotional responses were actually disrupting Kethvar technology. The aliens communicated through controlled harmonic frequencies, and their equipment was designed to work with species that had orderly, predictable mental patterns. Human emotions were too chaotic and too intense for their systems to process. "It's like we're broadcasting static into their communication networks," Helen explained in a report to Commander Morrison. "Every time we feel fear, anger, determination, or any other strong emotion, we're interfering with their ability to coordinate their forces." Back on Liberty Prime, Jake Morrison was coordinating humanity's desperate defense. The situation reports coming in from around the solar system painted a clear picture. The Kethvar had superior technology in overwhelming numbers, but they were struggling to understand human responses to their attacks. "Sir, we're getting reports from all over Earth and Mars," Lieutenant Walsh reported. "The aliens are having trouble with their occupation forces. Humans are not responding to their control methods the way other species have." Jake studied the tactical displays, showing Kethvar ship positions around Earth and Mars. The alien fleet was powerful enough to destroy both planets, but they were not trying to cause mass destruction. They wanted live slaves, not dead worlds. This gave humanity a small advantage that Jake intended to exploit. "All defense units, this is Morrison." Jake broadcast on all military frequencies. "The enemy wants us alive, which means they have to be careful about how much force they use. We don't have that limitation. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and make them pay for every meter of ground they try to take." The first major battle took place over the ruins of Los Angeles. A Kethvar command ship had landed in the city center, expecting to begin processing human slaves for transport to their empire. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by resistance fighters who had turned the entire city into a battlefield. The battle lasted for 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the HFY command ship. Human forces had used everything from military weapons to modified construction equipment to attack the alien vessel. The explosion could be seen from orbit and sent shockwaves through the entire HFY fleet. Overlord Zethkrin received the news of the defeat while aboard his flagship in Earth orbit. For the first time in his long career of conquest, a species had not only resisted neural subjugation, but had actually destroyed one of his command vessels. The reports from his ground forces were equally disturbing. Humans were adapting to HFY tactics faster than any species he had ever encountered. They were reverse engineering alien technology in real time, developing countermeasures to weapons and defenses that had never failed before. Most troubling of all, they seemed to be getting stronger and more organized as the fighting continued. "This is unprecedented," Zethkrin told his command staff. Previous species either submitted immediately to neural subjugation or died fighting conventional battles they could not win. These humans are doing neither. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Liberty Prime, watching the tactical display as reports continued to flow in from around the solar system. Humanity was holding its own against impossible odds, but Jake knew this was just the beginning. The HFY had committed only a small part of their forces to what they had expected to be an easy conquest. Now that they knew humans would not submit, the real war was about to begin. But Jake was beginning to think that maybe, just maybe, the aliens had picked the wrong species to enslave. Humans had never been good at following orders from their own leaders, much less from alien invaders who wanted to put them in chains.